Now, sally forth!
Hello people of the world! I'm here today to take a self-indulgent moment to talk about Nagi Usui. She's a character from the game NEO The World Ends With You. This video is going to contain a few spoilers for it, so if you're here having not played it, just please don't let this video spoil you and go enjoy TWEWY and NEO TWEWY for yourselves. They're fantastic experiences, ones that encourage people to connect to one another and enjoy each moment of their lives. This is technically an extract of a video I'm working on for NEO TWEWY, but currently that and the video I'm working on for the first game are both incredibly long, so Nagi gets her own dedicated video. Again, very self-indulgent. But I won't stall anymore because it's time to dive in.
Pardon the intrusion!
We first meet Nagi on the third day. When searching for a new player, we end up colliding with her and she instantly lashes out at Rindo. I can only assume this is because she thought that he and Fret were Reapers because they were able to collide. This means she makes a pretty bad first impression. She's too focused on her hobbies, she unintentionally enters our protagonist's mind, only to complain about it and then attack him. Rindo is able to view this because of his powers, but is utterly confused. It doesn't help that afterwards, we've got to travel back in time to get a pin to weather her storm. Despite not being interested in elegant strategy, or Alestra for brevity, at all, Rindo is forced to go and collect an Alestra pin for her. But once we do, she quickly changes her tune, treating him with respect even when she berates the way he thinks at first. Probably because he gave her something related to her obsession with Alestra. A big part of Neo's story is the idea of mental growth being stunted, particularly when relying on others' power rather than your own to get through tough situations. Neo's trio represent this in different ways. Rindo's mental growth is stunted by his reliance on the original cast. Fret's is his reliance on the positive facade he wears to cover up his real self. For Nagi, however, it's her reliance on her favourite mobile phone game, Elegant Strategy, or Alestra. Nagi uses Alestra as a coping mechanism, especially as it constantly has new updates to look forward to. For Nagi, these updates are a lifeline, an escape from stress because it means she'll have something to look forward to when she escapes the game. She embraces her interests and allows them to impact her daily decisions, something that gets her into trouble when she goes out to an Alestra Cafe collaboration, picks up the Reaper pin recommended by Tomonami's voice actor, only to end up in the Reaper's game. And this isn't the last time her addiction to the game causes her trouble, but she still chooses to view as much as she can through the lens of Alestra, almost gamifying the Reaper's game in order to cope with its trials. Due to her age, she's past the point where she simply hides away her own interests for the sake of acceptance. This shows the 3 years in between her and Rindo provide her a different mentality. Fret and Rindo both avoid speaking their minds because they don't want to be ostracized.
This is fine.
I bid you adieu.
Unlike them, Nagi cares little about changing herself for the sake of others, so much that she actively disdains those who do so. This leads me to her friendship with Fret, summed up well by our very own author of the Secret Reports. The team's new member, one Nagi Usui, is at once open-minded and closed off. Interestingly, this makes her the perfect foil to Tosai Furusawa. This is why Nagi can be a very hot and cold character. To people like Rindo, who take notice of her interests or are visibly struggling, she treats them with a lot of respect. But to Fret, she despises his constant refusal to accept his own feelings. Fret doesn't acknowledge his own pain, even when he's the one that knows the most about it. Nagi, despite not knowing that pain's source, is able to see he isn't being genuine. Nagi isn't too happy about him constantly blocking it out, but she doesn't want any direct conflict. So she... well...
I don't believe I was speaking to you. I don't believe I was speaking to you. I don't believe I was speaking to you. I don't believe I was speaking to you.
Right. My bad.
Has this fool developed a resistance to my attacks?
I'm not too sure this was the best way for Nagi to handle her dislike of Fret, but I swear this improves, just stick with me here. Unlike Fret and Rindo though, Nagi uses every long Shakespearean word she can to get across her thoughts, and this is what makes her Fret's opposite. As Nagi's character designer Miki Yamashita says, Nagi's the polar opposite of Fret and Rindo. She's a little bit more of a subdued character, who can't assimilate into a social environment as easy as the other two. Taking that into account, we decide to go with colder, cooler colours in her design. Her reliance on Alestra also produces her distance from others, and this is where it also causes her trouble. This reliance on Alestra projects onto her perception of Minamimoto. She completely forsakes the warning signs around him in favour of viewing him as her favourite character. At first, she's entirely unable to separate the two. This might feel familiar to those who watch, read, or play a lot of things. You can often identify yourself or people you know with characters that relate to them in one way or another. This can be through identity, mannerisms, or the way they interact with other characters. It's likely the reason why many people give these characters psychological traits, or they'll analyse them much like I've been. It's only when Minamimoto abandons them that she realises her thinking is flawed. She views herself in grey and everything else in black and white. But the Reaper's game helps her break out of this mindset. By the middle of the game, we're seeing more of Nagi's flaws. Not only does she come off as too much of an otaku sometimes, but she's more talk than action. She can express as much as she knows about a scenario, but she takes a long time to act on and grow from this knowledge. Her long expressions of how she understands people also pushes her into a position of impartiality, this grey zone that causes her to grow slower than the others. Her refusal to enter conflicts puts her a bit too much into her own world. When people try and directly connect to her, however, she can come off as incredibly cold or just plain dismissive. She doesn't want to be antisocial. The long phrases she uses is a sign of her need to say things that resonate with others. But during the middle of the game, she has to learn that forming direct connections is an important part of life. These people aren't just her evaluations of them, they're as complex as she is. There's a certain party member who joins midway through the game, and they look very similar to an Alestra character, much like Minamimoto, but Nagi doesn't actually make comparisons between them. A small but sure sign that she's becoming more open-minded. Another sign of this is her ability. Nagi's ability, Dive, allows her to go into the mind of another character, seeing their inner thoughts and emotions, and also being able to erase any noise inside of them. When first explaining Dive, she expresses she has little problem using the ability. For her, it's as easy as scanning another player. I believe that this, and her character in general, is a metaphor for hyperempathy. Hyperempathy is where empathy, or a person's ability to look at things with another person's perspectives, deeply affects a person. This isn't really a condition or an emotion, rather it's a trait that people can possess. Dive seems to say that Nagi has a bit too much empathy. She has sympathy, or the ability to understand other situations from a more personal perspective, but this is unbalanced by her empathy. Her ability to actually step into their minds and create a full picture of what's going on in their head. She rarely thinks of things from her perspective, rather she uses empathy to create a literal mental image of others' minds. There is some research to suggest that there are 3 distinct types of empathy. Cognitive empathy, or emotion recognition, describes the perception and identification of others' feeling states. This is how well you can actually identify how others are feeling. Affective empathy, or emotion contagion, describes the subjective mirroring of others' feeling states. Simply put, how much do you feel the same way that others are feeling? Compassionate empathy, or feelings of sympathy, concern, and passion for another, is theorized to be a common but not definite consequence of the other 2 forms. Essentially, your ability to act on the other 2 forms of empathy. You may have been told to read a room before, and this phrase is a struggle to get behind. It's difficult to read a room in the first place since it's not always easy to figure out what others are thinking. But even if you don't find this as difficult, there's another layer of challenge to act on this knowledge. It's the pressure of knowing whether your evaluations are right or wrong. This ability to act on our empathy is what takes mental preparation. It's why Nagi is exhausted after every dive she takes. She finds identifying how people are feeling easy, but acting on this knowledge is what she finds tough. But I'm starting to beat around the bush. There's one main day that we have to talk about. At the start of the day, Nagi seems the most concerned, a result of her evaluating Shiba's speech. She's done this before, but at that time her evaluation was wrong. Shiba's not cold and calculating. He's a hothead who impulsively retaliates against those who oppose him. Nagi's evaluation of him on this day is proven right. Once an empty Ayano appears, Shoka has to fight her. After the battle, Nagi introduces Elestra to Shoka, trying her best to comfort her in her own way. This doesn't fully work, but Nagi's reliance on Elestra is what got her through the Reaper's game, so the recommendation still gets some appreciation from Shoka. There's a good chance that Nagi realised that Shoka is the type to play phone games, which is an early hint of some future events. When bumping into Fuya, and especially when encountering Motoi, Nagi reassures Rindo they can hold their own. Nagi mentions how these empty husks have no real emotions, something that makes this less taxing than Charles' past. This can be read in different ways. She could be saying this because they're plague noise. These aren't actual noise that represent emotions like in the dive fights, although this can be read as her recalling events from a time before the game. I opt for the latter reading, and in the past I've advocated for her overcoming these events. This may be me coming at it from a more grown mindset, but it actually makes sense that these aren't brought up further. If her dialogue really is meant to imply that she's been through something in the past, she's likely processed these events already, regardless of whether these events gave her closure or not. This is likely what's given her the current mindset she has. It's this mindset, the one that's caused her to distance herself from Fred, that allows her to help him. I'm about to play a small part of a conversation from the game, and I'll be dubbing over it. Miranda Parkin did an incredible job lending her voice to Nagi, but sadly this scene isn't voiced. That means you'll have to put up with my voice instead. If that doesn't sound like your thing, please do skip to the timestamp on screen. Humanity is the difference between making an effort to understand those around oneself, versus viewing them merely as resources to be consumed. Humanity is the difference between trying to understand opinions and values divergent from one's own, versus scoffing and dismissing them as meritless. Humanity is the difference between being fraught with fear when facing others, versus being blithely unconcerned with others altogether. And now, having discerned your humanity, I can safely infer that in this moment, you are suffering a great deal of pain. Perhaps. I am simply aware of the importance of communication, and I take great pains to ensure my interactions with others remain as peaceful as possible. Asking questions, gauging responses, reacting aptly. I leverage every element at my disposal. Actions, words, emojis, anything at all, to ensure everyone feels welcome. 'Tis a skill that can be practiced and honed like any other. No need to rely on special powers. The way this conversation is written really shows just how carefully Nagi chooses her words. Nagi first explains her views on humanity as a whole. She believes being human is trying to understand those around you and feeling weight to your interactions as a result. You may have a little or a lot of fear when interacting with people. This heavily applies to Fred, since he fears being genuine. Applying this to him, he is human. Not sure whether Nagi should get her glasses checked. Jokes aside, Nagi knew at this moment that he didn't need someone to say it was okay. It wasn't. The loss he experienced resurfaced his loss from before. Rindo is close to Fred, but it's this closeness that makes him feel like it's too much of a risk to call him out for his positive behaviour. But this positive behaviour has stopped Fred from processing these losses. Rindo and the others were able to see how he was grieving, see past his facade. but both Nagi's distance and empathetic mindset allow her to speak up about it. Fret diverts the attention from himself to Nagi though, praising her ability to see past his facade. She takes the opportunity to open up a little and explain how she gauges people in order to communicate. Her main goal when communicating is making sure there's no conflict between her and who she's talking to. She believes the way to do this is to stay highly aware of others, picking up on how they communicate to understand who they are, keeping their interactions peaceful in turn. Her personality is definitely pacifist, and this causes her to keep a distance. But the Reaper's game helps her understand that to progress as a person, you need to get to know others on a personal level, sometimes even those you don't interact as well with. At first, Nagi thought that interacting with Fret would only pain them both. She instantly recognised how different they were, so her black and white mindset caused her to shut him out. But this conversation acknowledges that they can be friends because of their differences. It proves to those playing this game that they can do the same. Her pacifist personality is also why others' well-being is so important to her. She wants to keep things peaceful for the sake of herself and of others. This is why her environment so strongly affects her, and why she tries to improve it. Improving it is much easier said than done. It's stressfully difficult because you can't always agree with people. There are times you have to disagree, clash with others. But communicating, like everything, is something you learn. Like everything, it becomes easier with practice. It also becomes easier the more you allow yourself to trust and rely on others. I'd say Hishima helping her is just one act that shows her that. If all of us had an ability like Dive, it would be much easier to connect to people. If you haven't noticed, there's nobody who can actually dive into your mind to erase creatures inside of you that are metaphors for your emotions. Wait, if that's the case, can I go home now? Yes, you can go home now. Okay, good. I don't like this place. I'm getting sand in my shoes. But what we can do is just keep an eye on the people around us and know when they need to rely on us and when you need to rely on them. It's a very human instinct to attempt to connect to others. Even the most introverted person still needs forms of connections to enjoy their lives. I'd say this is what makes Nagi so easy to connect to. Admittedly, no other character has connected to me quite as well as her. I feel like the character her experiences have produced is similar to the person that I am. Someone who's made many mistakes, who hasn't always been able to communicate clearly, who hasn't trusted people and has hurt people and pushed them away as a result. But also someone who uses what she's learned to try and connect to the people around her, to try and improve their lives and hers as well. This is why out of any fictional character's story that I've had the pleasure of experiencing, Nagi is the most human out of all of them. But of course that's a matter of personal opinion, so I have to ask, who's the most human of any fictional character you've seen? Let me know down below, and thank you for listening to my explanation of my answer. Until next time, take care people of the world.